Okay, welcome. Good morning, everybody. It is, oh my gosh, how did this happen? It's Thursday, March 30th, and it is, we have two big floor reports today. We actually have several. We have 4 of our bills are on the floor today. Vermont Saves, the sister state, our labor bill S-102, and our big housing bill. So it is a big day for Senate Economic Development on the floor. We are going to begin today, before we go through the walkthroughs of 2 H bills that have come to us from the House. The first one being an act relating to miscellaneous workers' compensation amendments, and which is H-217, and then we're also going to do a walkthrough of H-157. An act relating to the Vermont Basic Needs Budget. Before we go to those, we're going to take a vote on the amendment that Senator Brock presented to us in full yesterday. There he is. And so we're just going to take a vote on that because we discussed it at relatively, we had 45 minutes to discuss it yesterday. So we are going to begin, I believe, Mistress Clerk. Senator Clerk.
Oh, gee.
If we're,
let me get this. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Brock, did you want to add anything? Because I think we had 45 minutes of good discussion about your amendment.
I think we had a rather lovely discussion.
We did. It was good. It was good. And it helped. It actually was very helpful for me. So I am grateful to you. Not for the amendment. Let me be clear, but for the full and thoughtful discussion.
Plenty of time to make up your mind.
You should be grateful for the amendment. Everybody has a right.
No, that wasn't what I was saying. I was saying I was grateful for understanding it.
Everybody has the right to vote in favor of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anyway, so at this point, I would entertain a motion to vote on. I would just ask us to vote about whether we. I would at this point, I guess, make the motion to vote out Senator Brock's amendment to S-102 unfavorably. And I would ask the clerk to, the vote is to.
Wait, well, can the chair make a motion?
Okay, I'm
I
happy to
never make a
entertain.
motion as
I'm not the chair,
I
I'm the
don't know if
vice
it's a rule.
May I just,
Yeah,
can I?
yeah, you can make the motion.
So how about if the motion is to vote the bill as recommended, so that yes means you're in favor of the amendment and no means you're not in favor of the amendment? I think that would be more clear. Or if that's not the way you normally do it,
You
fine.
could say,
do
you
it
could
way
vote
you
the
normally do.
amendment out favorably, and then if you support the amendment, you vote yes, and if you don't support the amendment, you vote no.
Yeah, that's, is
Randy,
that the
why
way
don't
you
make a
normally do
motion
it?
to approve your amendment.
That's a good
I'm
idea.
happy to do that. Let's make a motion that every responsible member of the committee vote in favor of approving this.
Oh.
I think that's a majority.
There it is, there it is.
All right.
Okay, the
I'm
clerk,
moving that the committee vote to approve the amendments from my amendment.
Okay, so shall I call the vote?
you shall,
Okay, Senator Brock,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
no.
Senator Cummings,
No,
Senator Harrison is a no. Senator Ron Hinsdale,
No, and I apologize, Randy, I wasn't there for the discussion yesterday. It was just getting my bearings here, but I do appreciate you bringing this forward. I think it'll be a good floor debate that helps people better understand the issue.
it was a great discussion. So a no with thank you for the discussion.
I learned.
Okay, so it is 1
That was with my
yes and
amendment.
4 no's.
That was with my amendment that all union organizers have to be below 5'5".
I do
That
not,
was-
I recall the discussion, but I don't think it was a formal
I passed the
amendment.
call. Nobody was threatening.
Great, so thank you. I will report that on the floor, what the vote is after Randy presents his amendment. So thank you very much. Thank you, Randy. And thank you, everyone else. And I think we are going to turn to our agenda, and we're going to go till 11, and then we're going to adjourn at 11 so that we can finish the work, the floor reports on S100, and so that we can finish our work. So
All right.
Damien, would you be kind enough to join us to do and at your places, Scott has very kindly provided the draft, not the draft, the bill as passed by the House, H 217,
Okay.
an act relating to miscellaneous workers' compensation and amendments. And you'll recall, we did not take, I believe this is one of the two bills that address this subject area. We had Senate versions of them and we chose not to take those up, but to wait for the House to pass their bill, which is what we have done, right? Okay, so this is the document from which we're going to be working.
Okay.
Thank you. And yes, I need to find it. And
Great. So for the record, Damien Leonard, Office of Legislative Counsel. So the section 1 of H 217 as passed the House sets the annual workers' compensation administrative fund rate at 1.5%, which is maintaining the same rate as last year. So to remind the members of the committee, each year we have to approve a new workers' compensation administrative fund rate. This is a surcharge on the direct calendar year premiums for workers' compensation insurance that funds the administrative program at the Department of Labor that resolves disputes related to workers' compensation. So for next year, it would be at 1.5%. It was 1.5% this year. And then the contribution rate for self-insured workers' compensation losses and workers' compensation losses of corporations approved under a provision of the workers' compensation law. This is basically two ways of self-insuring your workers' comp is remaining at 1%. So it's actually worth noting the statute does not provide for us setting that rate every year, but every year we reiterate that it remains at 1%, I think mostly for clarity purposes. And so it's important to note that if you're buying your workers' comp insurance through an insurance company, you're paying on the premium. If you are self-insuring, you're paying on your actual losses. So two different ways that you're paying, and this is.
Sorry, can you just repeat that? Self-insuring, we're paying on losses?
Yeah, you're paying on actual losses because you don't have a premium. So it looks at your losses for the year. And so each year, and I'll let the department talk to this, they determine what the rate should be based on their the balance in their fund and the projected costs for the coming year. And that's all set out in statute. And so they come in, this is the rate they proposed, which would be the same as last year. There are some projects that they've been funding, some IT modernization with some of these funds. So again, it's a self-funded program and this supports that program, and they can speak to that more. Section 2.
So just to get, I'm trying to get my head from housing to workers' comp. Every year I know that the department comes to us with a rate and it's based on, so I hadn't actually fully appreciated this before, that it's based on what we've paid out in actual losses the previous year.
No. So
Okay.
So the rate is based off of what the department projects the premiums and the losses for self-insured employers are going to be in the coming year.
So they're all projected.
Right.
Okay,
Versus
not on the
its
actual
own
losses of the
projected
year.
costs to run the workers' comp
Okay.
program.
But it's
So-
not the whole workers' comp program. I heard that it's the dispute process of.
Well,
of the
so
program.
Jeff can talk more to what the department does. They help resolve disputes. They adopt rules. They regulate the program. They don't regulate insurance products. That's done through DFR, but the department oversees the whole workers' comp scheme within Vermont. So there's more to than just resolving disputes.
Okay.
And I apologize for
It's all right.
minimizing what they do because they do a lot of work on this program.
And Okay.
And so we do have the Director of Workers' Compensation and Safety with us this morning, Dirk Anderson, and he can answer more questions about the work that the department does on it.
Okay.
So the main takeaways are that we set this rate every year, and this is basically keeping the rate flat from last year. So this is not an increase, it's not a decrease, it's just flat funding. Or at least a flat rate. I don't know what the funding generated is projected to be. Section 2 goes into the actual annual rate setting statute. So this would amend that statute. And if you turn to page 2 of H217, you'll see there's a new subdivision 2 that says, in the event the General Assembly does not establish the rate of contribution for direct calendar year premium for workers' compensation, the rate shall remain unchanged from the prior fiscal year. The reason this language is proposed to be addressed is, as some of you may be aware, several times in the last few years, we have had near misses where the bill that this rate was in gets stalled because of some other provision in the bill.
Yep.
And in the closing days of the session, we have to move quickly to find a vehicle to drop it into to make sure that we're actually funding the workers' comp program. This is essentially an insurance provision that says if the General Assembly, for whatever reason, doesn't do something, or for example, this gets put in a bill that gets vetoed, or something like that, and there aren't votes to override the veto, then you would still have funding for the workers' compensation program because the work they do is necessary.
Yeah.
So, and that would allow them to at least have funding, even if it's not quite the right amount of funding. So it's just an insurance provision. The default is still to have the General Assembly set the rate and update it.
I think this was the rate that the former chair of this committee tried to take the legislature out of, but that discussion was in finance. But workers' comp, I think, has bounced around in jurisdiction. My last pass through here, workers' comp wasn't here. And that's when I dropped out of NCOIL because I was no longer on an insurance committee. And I was on the workers' comp committee. Actually, I chaired it there. So, now it's back here.
It is, although this provision is kind of funny because workers' comp comes to this committee now, but taxes, of course, go to finance. So it I think for a while, because of the tax issues, workers' comp and UI were being sent to finance.
Yeah.
But I think one of the challenges that we ran into there was because finance had so much work with dealing with tax issues, that finance did not have the bandwidth to deal with bills that came over addressing sort of substantive, even housekeeping issues within those programs were getting stalled out when they came over from the House, because the committee didn't have the bandwidth, particularly at the end of the session if the House proposed a late change. And then, so I think, and this is my understanding, I always encourage you to check with your Senate leadership. My understanding is the policy part of it is here, but then the tax will need to drive by at a minimum in finance just for approval.
But this way, and there was a reason why we couldn't just say, unless you're gonna raise it, it doesn't have to come here. But this way, if we just didn't get around to taking it up, it would.
Yeah, so we could we could, as the General Assembly, grant authority to the department to do this on their own. The House has historically opposed that. The fact that the House has sent over something that would allow the rate to default is a movement from the
That's a
former
big-
health position,
that's a step
which was like 100%
Yeah,
opposition to
I
it.
agree.
Because the former chair of this committee did send a bill to the House that would have allowed the department to set the rate each year and just report what the rate was gonna be.
That's right.
And the House nixed that under the former chair of House Ways and Means.
So this is a good
But
step
there's a
forward.
new chair there, so.
There is, and so,
So workers' comp has shifted to GovOps?
no,
No, where's-
so
where's it?
Ways and Means.
No, but I mean in the House,
In
is
the
it
House,
no
it's
longer?
still with Commerce and
It's
Economic
okay.
Development. But Ways and Means had opposed giving any rate setting authority to the department. And this, at least, this is in between. It allows for a default rate if the General Assembly doesn't agree.
Yeah, and that's usually our problem and not workers' comp problem. So I think this is great. I think
No,
our
this
former
is
chair will be happy.
Yes. So,
Having zoomed in.
He often watches us.
So what section 3 does is, and this is on its face, probably the most confusing section in the bill. What this is doing, you'll see language from pages 2 to 3. It looks like we're adding new language. What we are doing here is back in 2014, we passed language as a trial around the discontinuance of benefits that allows a workers' compensation claimant to file for an extension if the employer or insurer files a notice that they're going to discontinue the benefits. And it gives them an opportunity to gather the documentation they need in order to argue that the discontinuance is inappropriate. We then extended that trial period, and it's set to sunset this July 1st. Rather than writing several different sections to eliminate the sunset and strike an old section of law, what I've done is simply taken the new law that's going to be enacted upon the sunset and added back in the existing language that you see underlined at the bottom of pages 2 to 3. So this was an effort to just put the language in there rather than saying such and such is repealed and such date is changed.
So we're letting the sunset happen, but what we're doing is embedding the new language in the bill.
Yep, and this will make it permanent without a sunset.
That sounds good to me. That doesn't sound
Yep.
confusing.
Has there been any problems that we know?
I would defer to
I think
the various witnesses to testify on that. I'll defer to them to testify on what the experience has been and why they think the sunset should be,
And,
why the temporary language should be made permanent.
and Damien, would you be kind of to remind us when the trial or the experiment, or whatever we
So
want to call it, the
it
trial
started
took
in-
place from when to when?
It started in 2014. It was set to run for a few years. We extended it 3 or 4 years later until this coming July.
Oh my God, so we went through 2020. That's a long trial.
Yeah, and
Quite as bad as John.
so, and then my understanding is at this point, they're ready to make it permanent language based on the experience with the trial. But again, I would defer to the department and the other advocates on this issue to speak a little bit more about that. I don't know the details of what's happened, how many claims there are per year that go through
We
this
got an
process,
update
et
on
cetera.
that anyway.
I think part of the reason we extended the trial was there hadn't been enough experience to really tell if it was working or not.
So we kept extending. So that is what the bill entails, those
That's it. Yep.
two changes.
Yep. And the effective date is on passage.
Yeah.
And that is it.
That,
Do you want to take testimony on that, or do you want to
We
move to
hadn't planned on
157?
it, but I'm happy to take for like 10, 15 minutes, and then we're going to turn to walking through basic needs. Because sadly, our priorities today have shifted a bit. So Dirk or Cameron, whoever wants to go first. And Dirk, I don't know if you have met, you know all the rest of us, but I don't know if you've met Wendy.
I don't think so. Hi.
Senator
Nice.
Dirk Anderson.
Wendy
Director-
Harrison.
Director of Workers' Compensation and Safety
Great.
for a year now,
Oh.
following the retirement of Steve Monahan. I was the department's general counsel for many years before that.
Steve
Nice.
Monahan was. workers' comp
Yeah, for a long time. He headed that division for how long?
For as long as I was here.
Since the 90s, I think. I
Yeah.
started in 2002 and he was already doing it.
Yeah, he was here when I came in the late 90s.
Anyway, welcome to your new
Thank you.
position.
Thank you, Senator.
Good to have you
Clarkson.
in your new capacity.
Big shoes to fill. I understand time is short and I'll be short. First, I'll just say we support the bill. I believe the advocates behind me support the bill. And I believe, although I cannot speak for the insurance industry, they do not oppose it. This is what you have before you, I believe, is either supported or not opposed. Supported by everybody, not opposed by anybody.
Got it.
I'll add a couple of things to what Damien said for context, because you asked a question about the lengthy sunset, Senator.
Well, no, like the lengthy trial.
The
The
lengthy,
trial, the sunset's gonna be swift.
lengthy trial. So after the first sunset, there was a report that Director Monahan submitted at the time, and I don't have that in front of me, but it was essentially inconclusive as to the effect of the 14-day period. So we extended it out for another 5 years. What the 14-day period does, and again, I'll defer to Ms. Massacott because she does this for a living, but it allows a claimant who does not want their workers' compensation benefit discontinued. Of course, they can appeal that, and they always have that right, but this allows them to file notice that requires the carrier to continue to pay benefits for an additional 14 days after the prior statutory 7-day period. And that is in theory, and I think in practice, long enough for the department to review that request. And if in fact the department believes the benefit should continue, the desired effect is that the injured workers' benefits do not terminate and then start again. They just continue. And that 21-day window is enough time for the department to review it without going through the full appeal process. So we're in favor of that. I believe Ms. Massacott is in favor of that. And I believe, I think, and you probably want to ask J.B. Fian, but believe
He
he
just
testified.
walked in the door. I mean,
I
unbelievable.
believe he testified in the House. I won't put words in his mouth that he does not oppose the elimination of the sunset and the permanency of the 14-day window. But again, that's.
Right, and just to clarify, how do we get to 21 days? We get the claimant is allowed to file a continuance. And then what gets us to the additional 7 days for the department to review all these documents?
Under the pre-existing law, the insurance carrier had to provide the department and the claimant 7 days notice before they discontinued benefits. So now if the claimant contests that discontinuance within the 7 days, the carrier is required to pay an additional 2 weeks or 14 days while the discontinuance is reviewed by the department to determine whether it's appropriate.
Okay, right. Thank you. Wendy?
Madam Chair, just a question on the fees and on the surcharge.
Yes.
So are you projecting an increase in, I would think you're projecting an increase in revenue just because of higher wages paid, more employment, and Maybe not,
That
but I'm
is,
just curious about what you're projecting and what your costs are.
okay, that is a very tricky question, because in good economic times, there are more employers with more employees, so premium goes up, but at the same time, as you probably heard from the Department of Financial Regulation, we have over the past, I believe, we have like a 6, 7, or 8 year period in which premium has steadily declined as a result of fewer claims. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
If fewer people get injured, which is what we want, then employers as a whole across the spectrum.
The rate goes down, so they
Rate goes-
then pay less.
And because
It went down.
we tax the actual premium, if injuries go down, our revenue goes down, but it could also be increasing just because the workforce is growing. So
Right.
those are the two things we have to balance.
So when we take this up more fully, if you would come back with a full report on the whole financial picture of where workers' comp is right now, that'd be great.
Happy to, but in general, we believe we're adequately funded at the 1.5%. And the last thing I'll say. give
So
other
that's the
people-
rate, and that's what we're keeping flat is 1.5.
Yes. The last thing I'll say, and this was in a report that was submitted to this committee by Director Monahan in 2019, the problem of not setting the rate until the last day of the session, which is what happened last year, is that the new rate goes into effect for insurance carriers on July 1st.
Right.
So
Doesn't give them much time.
it doesn't give much time.
Got it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Or
I'll just add one
Cam.
other thing.
you could stay right there if you want, just
Cameron
introduce yourself.
Wood, Policy Legislative Director for the department. The House, on the 14-day period for claimants, the House had asked us for information on the number of individuals who take advantage of it. And we found that there's not, a significantly large number of people who take advantage, and it's to their
I mean,
benefit.
who use it, maybe not take advantage,
Yes, ma'am.
but use.
Yes, but the people that do, and they have their benefits continued, it is a significant help for them. So we can pull that information and bring it back to the committee if you'd like, when we take some more
That would be
testimony on this.
great.
But we found that, even though it may not be a large number of individuals who use it or exercise the right there, for the people who do, we found it is a great benefit to them. So.
Great,
It's good to
which
know.
is what we hope, which is why we have.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for Dirk? Cam, want to hear from you for a minute, and then we're going to shift gears.
If you need to, happy to.
Okay,
any
or is
questions you
is
have,
that
I'm okay.
good? Okay, and we'll just get more info from the department. And Dave, do both of you want to speak to this, Jamie? Any of you want to speak? David, you want to speak on behalf of? Because we don't know, we haven't met you yet, so.
A few weeks ago, Kelly Massacott, I represent injured workers. I'm happy to speak for Dave again.
Either way, you two duke it out.
I'll just jump in real quick. David Mickenberg here on behalf of Vermont Association for Justice and Working Vermont. We supported 217 in the House, and I'm glad that it's on its way over, or that it's here, and look forward to, and I just jumped in to say, look forward to a more robust conversation about some of the updates to the workers' comp statute that are contained in S101, where Kelly Massacott, Attorney Massacott is expert and can
And that's
walk-
where we heard from you.
Exactly, and can walk you through some of those. And we've been having good conversations with the department about it, and think that hopefully we can get to a good place on 101, which would be hopefully included in 217 as an update to our workers' comp statute. So that was it.
Right, I know that was what had been discussed.
Yeah.
Great,
All right.
terrific, thanks.
Thank
Jamie,
you.
you want to say anything?
Only because this is prompted now.
Uh-oh, here we go.
Jamie Field with Primer Piper Eggleston Kramer on behalf of the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. It's a national trade association of over 1,000 companies, several hundred of whom write business in Vermont, including many who write workers' compensation. APCI did not oppose H217 as it came out of the House. Our comments focus primarily on the continuation and that ability to bring new information to the table, and We found, as you just heard from the department, that it isn't highly utilized. And in thinking about whether or not to remove the sensor or not, we thought maybe it would be more problematic to change the rules again, and why not live with something that's been in place for a couple of years. So, and the contribution rate is, what it is. So, but S101 has some more significant policy proposals, and I'm not prepared to testify to that.
And we're not prepared to have you testify.
Okay.
So the good news is that.
Great.
So
So
we-
I would like to reserve the opportunity to come in and talk about that, because those are significant.
I think Scott has already noted that.
Thanks again.
So when we can take up S101 and any other witnesses you think we need to hear from, please let us know.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks for your support. And that's terrific. Great. So more to follow. We'll obviously be discussing this at greater length, but this is just our introduction to what the House did. And that is actually a big step forward. So that's exciting. Damien, do you want to take the throne again to discuss, walk us through H157? Thank you, everybody. More to follow. I can't believe today's 30th of March. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's my roommate's birthday from college.
I'm amazed that you remember your roommate from college's birthday. That's dedication.
She's a very important person. So to me,
Okay, so for the record, again, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. H157 deals with updating the methodology used to calculate the basic needs budget every 2 years. So just to refresh everyone's memory, and for those of you who are tuning in to this streaming sensation on YouTube, the basic needs budget and the Vermont livable wage are something that the Joint Fiscal Office calculates every 2 years as an informational device that's used in policymaking. So it is not setting the minimum wage for Vermont. But what it is doing is saying, if you work 40 hours a week and you fall into one of these 7 household types that they currently use under the existing methodology, how much money do you need to earn in order to meet your basic needs
right.
without public assistance? And so this informs our decisions around things like, how do we structure public assistance programs? How do we look at questions of wages and hours and other employment protections? Are there cost drivers in Vermont that we can address another way to bring down these costs? For example, is the cost of transportation rising much faster than in the rest of the country? And is there a policy lever that we could pull here to address that? So it's not it has been discussed at times as this should be the marker for the minimum wage, but the tool itself, it's worth noting, while you could think of it that way, you can also think of it as, this is telling us that in the basket of goods we have JFO look at, costs are rising significantly with good A or good B, or service C that everyone needs to get. And is there a way we can address that cost for people? And what are our options? Do we try to find ways to get more money to workers? Do we try to find ways to drive down the cost of healthcare? Do we look at our public assistance programs? Are they properly structured? Or are we seeing a big cliff that's causing people to need more money? And about every 10 years, we update the methodology because time moves on, and it was originally created in 1999. We updated it in 2012, and now
Time
it's
for an
been
update.
11 years since then. So this would create a technical advisory committee to update that methodology. It would include 2 members of the House, 2 members of the Senate. The House and Senate members could not be all from the same political party, so it's going to require a diversity of political viewpoints. Secretary of Human Services or designee, a member of appointed by the Sustainable Jobs Fund, a member appointed by the Society for Human Resources Management, Vermont State Council, and a member appointed by Capstone Community Action. So those three groups were chosen partially based on interest and partially based on they're representing different facets here. So Society for Human Resources Management is an employer side group. Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund is an employee side group, and Capstone Community Action is a community organization that provides assistance to members of the community. The duties would be to honor before November 1, 2023, study the topics we've listed, and then provide findings and recommendations for revisions to the methodology, as well as potentially recommendations for any necessary legislative action to update the underlying statute to the Joint Fiscal Committee, the House Committee on General and Housing, and this committee. The topics the committee would be directed to study include a review of the current methodology, potential changes to the methodology for calculating the basic needs budget and determining what a livable wage is, including the identification of not more than 7 household configurations to be utilized in future determinations. That language was added specifically because and Dan Dickerson from Joint Fiscal would be a good witness to have in on this. He's done a lot of work on this issue. That was identified because Joint Fiscal's experience in preparing the basic needs budget over the last several years is that currently 2 of our household configurations, I think it's an adult living in their own housing and then an adult living in shared housing, both without children. You're getting roughly the same information, so it's not helpful.
It's rental housing. It's adult living in rental housing.
Rental housing. And so the problem they've identified is we've got one household configuration that's actually not giving us much information. So is there a better way to look at it? And there are also questions around things like, should we change the ages of the children? Because they're looking at specific age children, et cetera, in these household configurations. So 3 is potential changes.
Sadly, they never will take into account that children are never not children and that their cost increases as they age. Sorry, I know you can look forward to this, but those of us with older children can attest to this.
So, and then the final thing is potential changes to the statute to account for public policy changes, data availability, and other factors that have had an impact on any aspects of basic needs budget calculation or the cost to Vermonters of basic needs in the last 11 years since this was last updated. The committee is required to take testimony from both subject matter experts and from a variety of stakeholders, including employers, employees, and organizations that represent employers and employees.
It doesn't ever say from normal Vermonters. So, I mean, they'll take testimony from whoever they want, but it's nice to have some guidelines here. But, you know, one would hope they would go beyond what's on the page here, and we'll get to discuss it.
Sure. And, you know, it's important to note too, that the committee is going to have half of its membership will be legislators.
Yeah.
Who I'm sure will be, you know, concerned about how does this affect our constituents in general. So the committee has administrative and technical assistance from the Joint Fiscal Office, technical assistance from the Department of Labor's Economic and Labor Market Information Division, and the legal assistance from the Office of Legislative Counsel. The committee is required to have its first meeting on or before August 15th. It selects its own chair. It needs to have a majority of its members present to have a quorum. It will exist until January 30th, 2025, which is my 45th birthday.
Yahoo!
Cool.
So
You put these all on your, as I recall, you have these ending on your birthday.
I always set the expiration date for my birthday. So
That's pretty funny.
yeah, it's just a thing. Probably shouldn't say that on the record.
I know.
I don't know
That's okay.
these days.
Maybe you'll get
It's out there on
unexpected.
YouTube forever.
It is.
But just think of all the birthday cards you're
Just
gonna
a-
get as a result.
One serious question.
Yes.
Actually, two serious questions.
Wait a minute, are you finished?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm out.
so
There's quite a bit
Order.
more.
yeah, compensation and reimbursement is standard reimbursement rates for legislators and members who are not state employees. So state employees, you get paid your state salary. You don't get anything extra. But if you're not a state employee, you're entitled to per diem and reimbursement of expenses. There's a $17,000 appropriation, $7,000 for per diems, $10,000 to the Joint Fiscal Office for costs related to expert assistance for the committee. Section 2 would require that the Joint Fiscal Office, for the basic needs budget they're preparing for January 15th, 2025, utilize the methodology and household configurations recommended by the Technical Advisory Committee. So what that does is it takes some of the pressure off the Joint Fiscal Committee currently has authority under statute to update the methodology.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, their November meeting is typically extremely busy. And so asking them to review the report and then update the methodology within 2 weeks on top of everything else for the November meeting is a recipe for not having the methodology updated. So the committee, the House decided to require that the 2025 basic needs budget be a trial run with the new methodology. And that'll give the Joint Fiscal Committee more time to address the issue and also potentially to see how it plays out and whether they want to make minor tweaks based on experience.
Great,
And effective July 1.
great. Wendy, you have a question?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a majority of the membership shall constitute quorum. Can they meet remotely? Is that assumed?
That is up to the rules of the chambers govern ability to meet remotely.
Okay, so that doesn't have to be.
To meet remotely. I've been doing that all morning, marrying words together and turning them into non-words. We can give them that authority. But otherwise, typically with these out of session meetings, unless we provide express authority, people come to the State House to meet and vote, and you would need to be in person to vote unless otherwise authorized.
Last year, the House rules required that any joint meetings you had to be present to vote.
Yeah,
Joint fiscal had to come together.
yeah, and so there are, and in the House, I know for their ethics, sexual harassment, and discrimination panels, all had to get a special resolution passed in the House to authorize them to meet remotely because of their time considerations if they receive a complaint.
So some joint committees have been able to meet remotely and in person. So,
Right, I think the
Because
issue
our
is
rules-
is whether you can vote. And I think House members, under their rules, unless they pass a
Right.
resolution allowing it, their members typically can't.
we
vote.
have a joint rules meeting coming up sometime soon, I hope.
Yeah.
And we have a Senate rules meeting tomorrow in which we can address this, or at least, raise the issue. I think I think that's something we can discuss as we discuss the bill, but I think that somewhere we need some latitude and flexibility built in so people can join maybe from wherever
And
they
with
are.
this committee, I mean, you could always just put in the statute, members may attend and vote remotely or something like that. And I could find the language on that, and that would just make it clear that for this committee. So one of the things to keep in mind with this committee is you're asking them in the space of 2.5 months to have 5 meetings and to come up with a new methodology. And
I thought we were starting this summer. And it's
so they exist for an extra year.
right. So if we're starting this summer, those meetings could take place over.
No, the due date for the report is November 1, 2023. The committee continues to exist for an additional year in
Oh, I
case there's a
see.
request that they do additional work.
Oh,
So to give you context to that, I overlooked that.
yes, we,
So to give you context to that, so the due date for the report is 2.5 months after the last day to hold the first meeting. You can always meet earlier. My experience, and I'm sure other members' experience here, has been that getting a meeting in July or August is extremely difficult.
so, but June, given that we, have veto sessions, all that, people will be around in June. It'd be good to get going.
The effective date of this is July 1, 2023.
Yeah, I know. Maybe we
So
should
you
make
would
it
need
that, we can discuss this.
You could make it on passage.
Yeah.
And if you got it done earlier, then you just need to get the bodies to actually appoint the
Yeah.
members,
Of that,
which is always challenging too.
Well,
because
Good
having done that, income tax for, in place of property tax for education.
the waiting
And trying,
setting.
yeah, to try and get 5 meetings in, we started in September, which was the first time people, and it was awful between holidays and
Right. you just
other
gotta- yeah.
commitments. It was
Well,
very difficult to get the
So-
meeting scheduled.
and the date of November 1st is there because we have a drafting deadline.
It's also there
I'll
because
just-
of the November meeting of the Joint Fiscal Committee, but it gets the report with any recommended legislative changes in a month before the deadline to request bills.
So, but the committee can always do a committee bill after that.
Committee can do a committee bill.
They can.
But, you know, it's typically in the past, these committees the members have sponsored a bill in their
Yeah.
chamber.
I realize, but there's
So-
there's always a way to do things that we need to do.
Right.
So, and this is because, so this date is driven because of the JFC meeting.
Yes, that and the drafting deadline.
Yeah, got it. I had mistakenly thought that the committee was meeting, and I wrote in that it was meeting and doing this final recommendation in 25. So I said, we need an update in January of 24 is my note. But
Yeah.
here we are, we're gonna have a report. Is
So
it, we can discuss this, but maybe it's like 2 phases. Maybe it's a first phase and a second phase, and that might actually be smarter.
So,
Because there's only so much they're gonna be able to accomplish between June and November. So. anyway,
right, so the
we can talk
original
about it.
version of the bill included a second report in calendar year 2024. That report was removed by the House because the cost of preparing that report preparing the report would have required extensive modeling. And JFO testified that their belief was that it would have cost more than $100,000. So the report was stripped out in the House with the possibility that there may be additional work in the second year. The committee will continue to exist, but for the time being, the House did not want to commit to that report when it didn't really seem to be going to the issue of the methodology. It was going more to the issue of questions around should the minimum wage increase, which was also getting away from the core focus of the committee. So the House pulled that report out with the possibility that they'll revisit questions around whether additional work needs to happen in the next session, because the committee will continue to remain in effect.
exists. So you create, and so we can do what we can next session, possibly extend the work and add different work. to
Yeah,
it.
you can just,
Got it.
you could amend this section.
Right.
um,
And we
add
are going to
additional work.
begin our work on this in the next week. So thank you. This
Okay,
is-
I have another
yeah.
question, just
Yes.
only this one. So I just tried to find basic needs budget on the main Vermont website.
Go to JFO
I
website.
went to JFO, I went to the legislature, I just get a list of budgets. So it would be really good, just for the public
Yeah.
too, to be
To have
able
it
to
more
access
clear.
this. And I know there are a
It's
million
there.
issues with, I'm sure it
Yeah.
is,
No,
but when I do searches, it doesn't come up.
Great.
So I just want to flag that. I know
So
that's not your responsibility,
the,
but maybe for this committee, if you could just send it and we can put it on our website, maybe
I'm
with,
sending it to Scott now.
perfect, and then just general comment. Our public outreach is insufficient. I'll just say that like 4,000.
or you mean our
Our
web page?
website, well, that's one thing that I think could be improved, but there's lots of access to the public and to
I agree.
towns.
I think the.
But that's a whole conversation and I'm
Right.
not,
It's huge.
yeah,
That's a big one for, and one, because
I just want to name it.
so anybody else have a question before we adjourn?
Just for the record and for folks who are paying attention, the basic needs budget is, in addition to on this committee's webpage, it is available under the Find Legislative Reports. So if you click on the Reports and Research tab on the top, on the left, you'll see a Find Legislative Reports.
So now you're on the legislative page, not
No,
the,
JFO.
Yep, the Vermont General Assembly page.
Oh, okay.
And then if you just type in the refine results box, basic, the very top thing that comes up is the 2022 basic needs budget and Vermont livable wage.
good.
And
Found
then if you're on the joint fiscal website site, under publications, you would find it under reports, I believe.
I just did a general search. So age 57, what I get under on the legislative one is the acts relating to the,
Go to find legislative reports.
I did. Well, I went to
Yep.
reports and research.
Almost easy
No,
to find
so-
with basic Google search.
So go to
Oh.
reports, click on reports and research. Click on find legislative reports.
Okay.
And is this on our webpage or
It
the
is.
general?
And then click on, just type in basic under refine results. And there it comes.
Good.
And then if you're on the JFO website,
Yay.
on
It's under
JFO,
publications.
it's under publications, reports. And then if you search on reports by, you narrow it to the 2023-2024 session, it is the very top entry on
Okay,
that
so
page.
So publications is where I go to JFO to get
Yes. Yeah.
reports.
Because if you search for budget, because they do the budget, you're
Right.
gonna pull up everything with
Right.
that.
Well, I tried basic needs, but it wouldn't even let me, then I
Yeah,
still got the
so
same
under
stuff.
their publications page, you'll
Yeah.
find it.
Okay, so
And this is not to say that we don't need to improve our legislative website. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
it's clear where we can find this
no,
info.
thank you. And it actually illustrates that it is there, but the getting to it is the
So-
challenge.
Yeah, and
No.
yeah.
So like under primary publications, or is it under
So
other
if you-
publications?
Yep, reports under primary publications,
Okay,
click on that. And then it says filter results along the side. And actually, it's the third item down under primary reports,
Okay.
January 17th.
on mine it's the
2023.
second, but okay, cool.
Okay,
Great.
All right, good.
Terrific.
Thank
Yep.
you, thank you. Now you might get some calls on how to navigate the website, but,
And birthday cards.
right,
So, thank you. I think with that, we're going to adjourn
yes.
and get